Hey guys, Gary J here. I'm going to be showing you carbide lamps or lanterns, and this is what they look like. And just give you a little idea of their structure. Now, if you noticed, this right here is the reflector. There's no glass lens on this; it's hollow. Maybe that'll focus right there. Now this is the same thing, but the reflector is smaller on this one. And right here in the center is a ceramic piece with a hole in it. And on the side right here is a striker. This is like a cigarette striker. You just pull that, see, and it's got a flint in it, and it shoots the sparks across the front of that. But carbide lamps were first made in the mid-1880s, I believe. Mid-1880s. They were basically flashlights and lanterns before there were flashlights and lanterns. And they're pretty unique in that sense. Now, what was the purpose of having something like this? You would see carbide lanterns on bicycles and even the early motorcycles made back in 1905, 1910. Motorcycles had carbide headlights on them, similar to this right here, but they had a glass cover on the front of them to keep the flame from being blown out. So what was the purpose of this mainly? You saw back in the late 1800s and 1900 to 1960s probably. And at that time period, people used these for headlamps on top of their hat. These were like for coal miners. Those people who did gold mining and stuff like that were in these caves and mines and so forth. Spelunkers used them. Those who do exploration of caves and things like that, they use these kind of lights on top of their hat. And the original hats were made of cloth, and these just kind of stuck up there. This one's got a flat edge right here that would stick into the hat itself. And this one right here has a round pin that would stick in some of the hats. And it's pretty unique how they work. Now, for this to be a light, it has no batteries, no wires, and no bulb. It works off of gases created in this chamber here, which creates acetylene. So we'll take a look and see how that functions and how you get this to work. And it's pretty simple in one way. Somebody was a genius that came out with the idea. But this is calcium carbide. And right here you can see there's a little lantern right here. And cheapcarbide.com is where you buy this. There are other places to buy it, but these people are about as cheap as you're going to get it. This is £1, which will last me forever for my use of carbide. They do make little cannons, steel cannons, different size cannons that you can put carbide in, and it'll make a popping sound like when you light it, like a little explosion. Those are special cannons made to use carbide. But there are over 200 uses for carbide too. So in factories and things like that, it's big time use for this stuff. And it's made out of coal. The coal has been refined in some special way. I can't remember if they add lime to the coal, and they put it in a heating electric furnace and heat it up to about 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. It causes a chemical reaction and creates carbide. Now, carbide doesn't look like much. I'll show you here. And you're just looking at these little black rocks right here. But the thing about them is that when you mix water with this, it gives off a gas, and that gas is what we call acetylene. You've heard of acetylene blowtorch welders use. Well, this is what this turns into, acetylene. So that's pretty interesting. Now, the way this works is the bottom part here is a reservoir. I mean, it's a canister that holds the carbide. And this right here is a drip. This little lever where my finger is right here, you push this lever around and then it controls the water that drips through here. I'm going to push that lever and you can see the water drip. Once it gets to a certain level, you can see the water dripping. You can increase that water dripping faster, and you can slow it way down or turn it off. And the purpose of that is it activates the carbide. Okay. Now, when it activates the carbide, you get the gas that comes off from that. The gas will come out this little ceramic piece in the middle here. And this striker right here, you turn that striker and it'll shoot sparks like a cigarette lighter does. Shoot sparks across the flame like a butane lighter. And that lights it. Now, one important thing here when you play with these things is that you got this rubber O-ring right here. You definitely want the rubber O-ring a good one. Sometimes people spray them down with WD-40 if they're old and whatnot. And because this thing has to seal really tight because you don't want acetylene coming out of here, the gas coming out of here where it's leaking. Because once it hits that flame, it's going to catch on fire around the reservoir in the container here. Now I know that there's a little bit of water in here. It has a certain smell to it too. Now, when you put water in here, a little much, but close the top of it. Now, okay, so we're going to screw this. We've got water in the reservoir here. Now, I know it's a little damp in here. So when I drop this calcium carbide, not calcium chloride, but calcium carbide, in here, you're going to see it probably start to smoke. That's acetylene gas. That's the part that is explosive. If it hits a flame, you do not want to be smoking cigarettes and do that. See the gas come out? And then we want to tighten it. I can smell it. Now you put your hand over the front of it right here. That contracts the gas, and then you run your hand across the striker. Okay? So I'm just pulling my hand across the striker. The reason I put my hand over it, that traps the gas right there. Now that's how the flame looks right here. See how you can adjust the flame on it. You want the flame about 1.5 inches long, but actually it puts out a pretty good bit of light. Roadmaster Indian. You get an idea what kind of light it has here. Now, I didn't put, you see it's dark again. I didn't put much calcium carbide in there. Okay, so you get a little idea about the light and the flame. And how did you use these things in the mining business? People are pretty inventive. They come out with other uses for it too as well. And what you could do, you got your flame out. I don't know if I told you or not. You fill it about 2/3 of the way up. Control your flame to about 1 inch out, or 1.5 inches. It lasts about 3 hours if it's filled up to about 2/3 of the way. And you could use it for several different things. You got your flame coming out here. You could the miners would light their cigarette with it. They light their pipe with it. This holder right here would get hot, so they'd put their hands around it to warm their hands. If you've ever been in a mine or a cave, it's about 60 degrees in there, so it gets cold. The only thing that warms you up in a mine is a shovel. When you're shoveling, you're working. So you can warm your hands, you can light your cigarette, you can light your pipe. Back then, they had coffee cups that were made out of metal, kind of like this right here. You would put this flame against the coffee cup and heat up your metal coffee cup, keep your coffee warm. And you can also write with it. It shoots out you can't tell it, but it's a black soot that it comes out of this. And on the cave walls, you could write instructions or information on the cave walls with this flame right here. That was another good use for it. They made these for hunters and fishermen, so they'd have a light source too, which was pretty cool. And they had multiple uses like that. And they're just a kind of a unique device. One thing too I want to mention is that you see how the reflector here is so flat. You look at the reflector here, it's flat. That casts the light straight up and straight down and toward me and then away from me. It gave you a 180 view of everything above you. So like if something started falling down from the mine, your peripheral vision would catch it. Now, if you're using a flashlight, your flashlight shoots a concentrated light beam. So there are a lot of things you won't see. You can see things better, but you can't see all around you. You can't use your peripheral vision like you can with one of these. So this was a really nice idea to have that wide a reflector on these things, because you can see everything in front of you. And your eyes adjust in a mine or a cave too. And those people who were spelunkers, they had these on their hat. And when they crawled through these small cave corridors and stuff like that, it would leave a soot trail across the top of the kind of like an old aqueduct or whatever you might have in these caves and stuff like that. These people crawl through these small places, but they would leave a soot trail across the top of it. So you got ready to turn around. If you could, got to an open place and you went back in, you could just follow that soot trail back to where you began. So you could use them for a lot of different things. But hunting and fishing and mining was a big thing back in those days, from 1880s and to probably the 1940s. They were fairly useful. And some people even use them today. Now, in mines, flames and methane gas, you get in the methane gas pocket in a mine, it will cause an explosion. So that's one of the reasons people don't use these in mines anymore. But they were useful back in the day when they first came out, and people enjoyed them. And there was also another thing I mentioned, that they had chandeliers inside people's houses with a hose running from the chandelier to the outside of the house with a big, tall canister that had carbide in it too, and it created acetylene, which lit the chandelier inside the house that would light up the house. There was a lot of interesting things they did with it, but factories use carbide, calcium carbide, over 200 different reasons in some of these factories. So it's got a very versatile use to it. Hope this gives you some idea about carbide lamps. And remember, bicycle lamps work the same way, except they had glass lenses over them. Motorcycle lamps worked the same way back in the early 1900s. They had glass lens on them to keep from blowing out the flame too. It's very interesting. Take care, guys. Gary J.